I was driving here this morning, I was going through East Brookfield, and some of you may know Larry Gordon, who's a selectman in East Brookfield, and Larry was outside his house with his granddaughter, and I stopped to say hi. His granddaughter turns 1 year old today, Ellie, and I started thinking, and the speech came to me, because I said, you know what? That little girl, Ellie, as she goes through her life, she doesn't know it yet, but almost everything that she will do or be a part of is because Steve Brewer has been a part of it. Everything you can point to, it leads back to Steve Brewer.
Well, the early years of Senator Brewer were spent here on the Daunt farm, our great uncles and great aunt. We spent a lot of time here helping them farm this land back in the days of everything being done manually. We grew up with horses and horse-drawn plows and hay rakes. We learned the work ethic early on. Brother Stephen was 2 years younger than me, but very industrious at an early age, and he loved farming, and I think we all spent quality years here learning that good work ethic, which obviously the good senator has taken with him through his whole life. Steve was heavily influenced here by our great uncle James, who was one of the Barre town selectmen. Early on, it was a treat for us little kids to see him get dressed up on a Monday night and put a tie on. The only other time you saw him like that was to go to Mass on Sunday. You know, I think my Uncle Jimmy really gave him the inspiration to go ahead and serve the public.
I can remember him running for selectman, and he was an individual as a select person who was so responsive to his public that it was obvious that not only did he love the job, but he cared deeply about the people he tried to serve.
Many times I have told people, if there wasn't any Bob Wetmore, there wouldn't have been any Steve Brewer. Senator Wetmore, thanks for being here.
I first met Steve when he was working as an aide for Senator Bob Wetmore before he actually went into the House. So he really tried to run the office whenever Bob wasn't paying attention.
From the very beginning, when he was working in Wetmore's office, he was extremely good at doing the job of getting things done for constituents.
I had agreed to be a speaker and told Steve that it was his turn to be filling in for me, which is what we did when I was early on. And but then my schedule changed. Somebody backed out of something. I wound up with some spare time, so I went to the meeting that I had scheduled Steve for. And he was there, and he was on time, and he was talking to people, and he gave me a chance to really observe how he was with the public and how he could react with the audience. And by then he had been training in the education department, I believe. He was interested in being a teacher, but he was good at being a speaker. And the audience and everything seemed to pay attention when he was talking. So I kept that in the back of my mind and said, well, when I have a chance to give him a boost, I want to. And I told him that, you know, what I thought would be a good move for him to make. And everything seemed to turn out well for him.
So when it came time to support Steve for state representative, and me and my twin brother eagerly were looking to support a candidate, my dad said, Steve Brewer from Barre is the guy that you want to support.
When he ran for state representative after serving as Senator Wetmore's aide for years, it took a real gamble. You know, we knew that it would be a hard-fought campaign. We were running against people from the stronghold of Spencer in the primary, and you know, he made a great sacrifice in actually having to mortgage his house, which was pretty well paid for, to help finance the campaign. Much different then than it is now. But you know, we had a lot of support, a lot of the local Democrats, a lot of the people that were friends of my uncle and the Daunt family growing up supported my brother.
We were stuffing envelopes and printing with an old dot matrix printer. And what was funny about that is that back then that was the highest in technology, but it was very difficult. And it was difficult because of lining it up. And I know that Fran and I probably one night put in 6 or 7 or even 8 hours, and it was very late, and Steve showed up, and we were proud to show him the piles and stacks of envelopes that were ready to go out. And I think that, you know, it was that moment there when I could see the satisfaction on his face, because he knew that we cared. He knew that we were doing it for the right reasons. And, you know, to see that, it's almost like getting satisfaction from your dad, that you did the right thing. And even though you worked through the tough times and the problems that we had with technology and labels and all of that, we were doing it because we trusted in Steve and we believed in Steve and we knew he would make a difference.
It was when he was running for state rep, and we were at some sort of fundraiser in West Warren. And anyone who knows Steve and I knows that we don't dance. And the people in charge of this decided that it would be really nice if Steve and I danced by ourselves on the dance floor to La Bamba. And if I could have given him a dirtier look during that song, I would have. But I don't think it would have been possible. I was humiliated and embarrassed, and I'm sure he was too, because neither of us are good dancers. And that is one of my most vivid memories of being on the campaign trail with Steve Brewer.
It was right from the start. I do remember when Steve was newly elected, and the citizens group COST had been invited to appear on a TV show in Boston, which was a local show called People Are Talking. And I was on a panel, but Steve was in the audience. And as they went around during the taping to talk to a few of the people who were in the audience, they stopped at Steve and, you know, said, "Oh, so Representative Brewer," you know. And Steve stood right up and looked around and he said, "I have been proud to represent the people of New Braintree for the past 13 days, because he was our newly elected representative. But we felt right from that time on, you know, that we had a friend and we had someone that we could, you know, rely on, never dreaming that it would be 6 long years of opposition. And, you know, you get to know someone pretty well when you spend that much time with people.
The tiny town of New Braintree represents a line that must be drawn against arrogance and expedience in government. This administration's move to force a 500-bed state prison on the tiny town smack of cold political calculation wrapped in questionable claim that time and money will be saved. Due process seems to mean little when the plaintiff is a small farming community, so small that it has negligible clout on Beacon Hill. The administration claims that establishing the prison in New Braintree, instead of beyond the Quabbin Reservoir in the region that it is meant to serve, will save time and money. They note that the site, a former boarding school, has some buildings in place. Yet the proposal put forth today says that this prison will cost upwards of $52 million with the very first phase. I predict that this prison will cost closer to $100 million by the time capacity for 500 beds is established. Mr. Speaker, no one doubts that the Commonwealth needs more prison space, but we fail to see the logic in the New Braintree site. There must be better state-owned sites, secluded, like those in Gardner and Shirley, yet closer to the cities from which the prison has come, and with the existing buildings that could be converted as readily as those in New Braintree. The New Braintree site will not be cheaper to develop per bed created. But isn't the real cost here being calculated in political terms? If Beaver Country Day School in Brookline closed tomorrow, would the governor propose putting a 500-bed prison in Chestnut Hill? I doubt it.
I don't think a prison had ever been sited in such a small community. And I think that at the time, it was politically convenient. I think that, you know, the powers that be, Governor Dukakis and his administration, never gave us credit for the, you know, the opposition that we would mount and how widespread our opposition would become.
And they were advocates of never in our community, and we are not going to do that. And what a compromise they were able to come up with. We have one of the best training facilities probably in the United States here for the state police. A great compromise. No prison, a wonderful training facility, and what it's done for our community. And what it showed, I think, everyone in this community is that Steve listens to us, the constituents that make up the community. He fights for us. He's our advocate.
At Colebrook, the night of his Senate win, it was just amazing sitting there, and I think everybody's pretty confident. He ran a great race, but you don't know until those numbers come in. And just seeing those numbers come in and seeing that hard work that he put together was just really amazing.
Steve Brewer, a proven leader, compassionate, responsible, and trusted. Steve Brewer has stood up for us, listened to us, and cared about us. He has represented over 300 square miles of this Senate district for the past 8 years and has had a 100% voting attendance record for 4 consecutive years. Steve Brewer was chosen Legislator of the Year by the Foundation for Economic Research, and as Vice Chairman of the Committee on Commerce and Labor, he is a leader on jobs. As a 3-term selectman of his hometown, Steve Brewer knows that local control is most often the best control. He has always supported full funding of local aid and state-mandated programs. Central Massachusetts is Steve Brewer's home, history, and his family's future. Steve Brewer for State Senate. Experience at work for you.
Every time election season comes around, I think of Senator Stephen Brewer and his age-old quote when he was reelected, the many times that he was reelected, "I've been sworn in, so now I can be sworn at."
I do solemnly affirm that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent on me.
Senator Brewer, as he told me, his maiden speech in the Senate was to get money for a feasibility study for a cemetery here in Winchendon. And evidently, obviously, I guess, that passed, and he got his money. But he really low-keys it.
This amendment provides $25,000 for the Commonwealth to conduct a study for the establishment of a state veterans cemetery in central Massachusetts. It is much needed. There are not enough things that we do for our veterans as it is. The federal government is not going to be building these cemeteries. It's a humane endeavor that we do to provide the startup costs. This $25,000 begins the planning, the siting, the implementation, so we can leverage the 50% federal money. And frankly, the Commonwealth's money can be leveraged with in-kind contributions. Now, we're not determining which location will be utilized in central Massachusetts, but I would say the good people of the town of Winchendon have already offered 125 acres of land to provide for a cemetery for central Massachusetts. And I honestly believe that it should be a top priority. In 6 days, many of us will be at our Memorial Day services honoring those who gave their lives for this nation. And I think that this would be a win situation for the citizens of the Commonwealth, for our veterans and all of their families. So I hope the amendment is adopted. Thank you very much.
The cemetery up in Winchendon is a great place. The ceremony was obviously attended by Governor Romney and a lot of the veterans from the area. I know that Senator Brewer is really proud. Charlie Grout, who is a veteran from Winchendon, was the first person buried at the cemetery, and his family was there. So it was a really proud moment of his.
Steve was very proud of the military service of his brothers. And he had wanted to go into the military as well, and because of a physical, he wasn't able to pass, he was unable to serve. But what he has done is to serve in so many other ways.
The Senate came up with a committee for Veterans and Foreign Affairs. They picked Senator Brewer as the committee chairman of that. And to have a non-veteran as the chairman, Senate chairman of the Veterans Administration or the Veterans Bill is really unusual.
We had not done veterans legislation in a long time. in a big, robust package. We had done individual pieces, but Steve really spearheaded the idea of a welcome home bill to let our veterans, our service members who are serving and have served know that Massachusetts is the most veteran-friendly state in the United States.
That was the start of Massachusetts really saying, we're here for you, we aren't going to forget you, thank you for your service.
Steve has been at the forefront for our first responders and those who work in public safety, our EMS, our fire, our police, and I know that he has a real love for the job that they do, keeping the citizens safe at every level. And I know that one of his main priorities serving here in the legislature has been to make sure that our policemen, our firefighters, our EMTs, paramedics have the tools that they need so that they can do their job effectively.
8 years in the legislature, I was on the Public Safety Committee, and Steve was always sitting right there next to me, chairing the Senate Public Safety Committee. So he's a strong advocate for public safety, a strong advocate for the Massachusetts State Police, for the environmental police, and all of our public safety agencies.
Yeah, we were very lucky that we got one of the only $5 million standalone grants from the federal government for this building. And Senator Brewer and our two representatives made it their mission to get us $1 million worth of funding in a grant from the state to do that. He invited us to the State House twice for meetings, and it was because of his leadership and the respect that he has on Beacon Hill that we were able to get $1 million additional grant funding for this building.
I chose him first as an assistant to the Ways and Means Chair, Steve Pangiotakis, because he has talent. He has a great ability to bring people together. He's got a very even temperament, and he uses that old farmer shuck thing, you know, to get people to, you know, off their off their game, and it works. So he was a logical choice to become chair of Ways and Means.
I remember the day that he found out he was going to become the chairman. He called to tell me and was really, really excited. I think he loves to say that he's a farm boy from Barre, and how proud that I think especially his mom would be. And one of his uncles, who was very close to him and was involved in government on the local level, I think he was really proud of the fact that he kind of, from a boy growing up in Barre who used to spend a lot of time at the library in Barre, and that's where he learned his love of history, to becoming the chair of the Senate Committee on Ways and Means was probably, well, was one of his proudest accomplishments.
By the way, he's also the Senate historian. If anyone who knows him, he can give you the history of any possible past and present president or vice president, or many of the people who line the walls of this office. He's a wealth of knowledge.
It's been really helpful to him in his role here, especially as, you know, not only as senator, but as chairman of the committee, to have that knowledge of history and to be able to, you know, rely on, you know, things that have happened in the past, that kind of, you know, we've been down these roads before, or people have faced similar challenges, or people have found themselves in similar tough positions, and here's what's happened, and to really help frame a debate, or help frame an answer, or help, you know, as chairman, sometimes he has to give people very tough news and you know, make tough decisions, but to be able to frame it in a way against a historical backdrop or a historical importance, I think has really helped him in the role and helped all of us to kind of really understand and keep that big picture perspective about what we're trying to do here.
Steve Brewer and Abe Lincoln, yeah, history buff, and you know, it was very difficult representing communities alongside Steve Brewer, because that meant that I would have to stand up and address people after he did. And besides being very articulate, there would always be the history quotes, reference to some great figure in American history and how it was relevant to whatever occasion we were at. And then I'd have to stand up and try to compete with that, and I never quite measured up, I don't think.
You know, that's one thing that Steve and I do share, that we both were history majors and became history teachers. And one of the things that he's been able to do is that everyone that walks through the State House, he has been able to tell them about the history of this building, tell them about the history of Massachusetts. And it doesn't matter, I've seen him do it with second graders to people who are well into their 90s or even 100, and he's able to teach someone something new about the history of our beautiful area.
Steve has been very strong on historic preservation. He's a big advocate of Sturbridge Village, which is in his district, and a couple of years ago my wife and I went out on 4th of July to see him dressed in full 1840s garb to recite the Declaration of Independence. And he's unlike some people, he actually looked like he belonged in that era and sounded like it too, and so he really played the role. And a lot of us, I think, if we were to put on a costume like that, would perhaps be embarrassed or we'd certainly look out of place, but Steve fit right into the village.
He will stick his neck out and fight for kids and the quality of the education that they need to have when, quite frankly, other politicians will sort of sit back and wait and see what might happen. We have built all kinds of new buildings in the Quabbin Regional School District. We have seen many schools within the Central Mass get new school buildings, not because we are particularly special, but because we had a senator who made certain that we were recognized as districts in need. And I really credit him for having the facilities in the Quabbin district that are really second to none. We're little towns sort of in the back end of nowhere, and those are the towns that that Senator Brewer represented. And he made sure that we were front and center on whether it be the Mass School Building Authority, whether it be on technology grants, whatever. We were front and center with that senator, and that senator had power and prestige, and he used it to make sure that the children in Central Mass were as important as those east of 495.
Yeah, most of our schools are regional schools, and the state has never funded regional school transportation to the level that it needs to be funded, and he's advocated that every year in the state budget to make sure that we're fulfilling our obligation to the schools.
One of his greatest priorities is education, certainly public education, which he's done so much for. On the private school side of things, he has been instrumental in helping Eagle Hill on many, many projects. I can tell you, without almost every single September, it seemed like he was at a groundbreaking ceremony, and then every single June he was back for a ribbon cutting ceremony here at Eagle Hill, and he helped champion all of those causes for us.
When he was first a senator, the town of Belchertown was in our district, which was another state school. And growing up in Palmer, which is right next to Munson, and in Belchertown, which is also right next to Palmer, there were two state schools, and there was a stigma attached to them. You heard all sorts of horror stories and the way people were treated.
When people were retarded, now it's developmentally disabled, they said, oh, they're insane. And they were shuffled off to these institutions where 1,500 people, could have been our brothers and our sisters, lived like cattle. And when they died, they took them and rolled them up in a blanket and took them out into a field. And they buried them. You would have buried your pet with more dignity and more honor than these people.
And he worked to make sure that every name of those residents was put on their gravestones so that there was a place where the family members could come back and they would actually know where their loved one was buried.
Steve Brewer's legacy will be more open spaces, more conservation land, more recreational opportunity, outdoor recreational opportunities.
In the city, a tree is usually an urban renewal project, but in our area, they're common. I mean, you want to keep them. So I think the folks that appreciate the environment, that like to get out into the forests or into the fields, that Steve Brewer has been a great friend to them.
When I think of Steve Brewer, I think of the Quabbin Reservoir. That's why it's so appropriate, Steve, that they named the fishing area at Gate 43, the Steve M. Brewer Fishing Area. There couldn't have been a more appropriate honoring.
You know, a lot of people in Boston think the Quabbin provides their drinking water supply and they don't want to see anything done in and around the Quabbin Reservoir. Steve Brewer knows the importance of the hunting, fishing, hiking, canoeing, kayaking value of the Quabbin and its tributaries, and he fought hard to make sure that message got across.
And he impressed on me in particular
the history of Quabbin, and I really came to appreciate the sacrifices made by the people.
Throughout my career, making sure that, as Ann said, those people that lived in Dana, Enfield, Greenwich, and Prescott, down by Greenwich and Graves Landing, and my friend Timmy Graves is here today. The sacrifices, when you know Earl Cooley, the people who lived in Dana, Mary Thompson, Howard Thompson's wife from Barre, who came from North Dana, the people who played baseball on those town commons. To go back on the Sunday of Memorial Day weekend to Quabbin Park Cemetery, and to know that the legacy of those people is interred there. I understand the intergenerational responsibility that we have, that we leave this planet a little bit better than what we found it. 1969, when the moon landing, Apollo 8, Jim Lovell went around the backside of the moon. On Christmas Eve, he read from the book of Genesis. In the beginning, there was darkness. And that lunar mission came around and saw this mothership Earth for the first time from outer space. Saw the blues, the whites, and the greens of planet Mother Earth, and changed the way we think about this world. Changed the way that Bob Wetmore worked in 1974 for the Environmental Bill of Rights and the Earth Day movement, and so many other things that we are blessed to have with. This is a legacy that has been my core, and I hope that it is passed on.
I've worked with Senator Brewer on a number of issues, and one thing that is clear in every issue that comes across his desk, from constituent services to budget to legislation, is that his priority is the people in his district. He cares about each and every person, and no matter who it is, what the issue is, he is always willing to help.
I think it was one of my first cases here. There was a poor woman who, I think she had her car repossessed, and she couldn't afford the money to get it out and to get to work, and he actually went down to the garage and paid for it himself to get it out of, to get it out, and that was one of the nicest things I've ever seen him do for one of his constituents, just take money out of his own pocket, to help them out.
Steve's the one that is going to be the voice of the underdog. He is always looking to help those that need it the most and maybe don't know how to access the help. And that is, over the years, has been the reason that there's been many phone calls at our home during dinner hour, on Sunday mornings, on Saturday nights. There's been people knocking at our door, but he always welcomed the people inquiring for help.
When I got into the legislature as a state representative 26 years ago, my two fundamental goals were to maintain my integrity. As the Irish say, a clear conscience is the softest pillow, and to maintain my marriage. I am proud to say I have achieved both. My wife, my best friend, the most beautiful lady I ever laid my eyes upon. In 1985, I married her, Val Brewer, right there.
Family life was, for what seemed normal for us, was probably very abnormal from a stranger's viewpoint looking in. Steve was seldom home on the weekends, and his days were long in Boston, and during the week there were often events. The girls didn't know any other life than Dad being politician, and it got them a lot of attention when they were out with him, which I think they enjoyed. I know April did. Steve adores those girls. They are his pride and joy, as they are mine. He has been the most wonderful father, and devoted and loyal, and when I lose patience with them, he is a voice of reason. And I can't say enough about the dad that he is and continues to be.
He is actually one of those few men who wasn't changed by success. He didn't alter who he was and what he had become. He is still Steve. If you see Steve here, he'd be wearing blue jeans and he might have his flannel shirt on or a field jacket on, just as he would have 30 years ago when I first met him. He hasn't changed. And I think that probably speaks to his character of who he is. He knows who he is.
One of my favorite things is how he always says, you know, he lives in the house he grew up in, and he is truly that boy from Barre, but he has made so much with that, and people will remember him not from being from a small town or a rural district, but for glorifying that area of Massachusetts, which people often say is forgotten. With Senator Stephen Brewer, it could never be forgotten.
But he cares. He truly just cares about his staff and everyone around him. That I think when you look at the headlines of our local newspapers and you see, you know, people who are in trouble or people who are making bad decisions, that's not him, and that never will be him. So all of us that have ever worked with him or for him have learned a lot, and really there's a lot to go on, you know, in the next session when he's not going to be sitting there. The one thing I dread is sitting down to be sworn in, and he won't be there. It'll be different.
History is going to remember Senator Brewer very fondly.
History will remember him as someone who cared, who tried his best every day.
One of the most passionate, effective, and hardworking elected officials in Massachusetts history.
The ultimate statesman.
A throwback politician to a different generation.
A perfect example of what a good politician should be like. And sadly, in this day and age, it's a very rare thing.
High integrity, honesty, man of his word, high energy. I don't know if he ever slept during his X number of years in here.
It seems like every time I pick up the Worcester paper, he's announcing the new Steve Brewer Auditorium at Sturbridge Village, the Steve Brewer Fishing Hole at some other town, the Steve Brewer Street, and it's we probably should change the name of Central Massachusetts to Brewer, or Brewerville or something.
I understand there's going to be a Steve Brewer Museum up there in his neck of the woods. I think that people you know, hopefully the next century can go in there and take a look and know who Steve Brewer is and was.
His name will be there for a long time. I'm excited because I know him, and so when I see these places that are named for him, I'm going to be able to say, I know who that is, and what a great man he is.
This now leads me to say thank you to the people of my district. With redistricting, somewhat of an accordion over these 26 years, I represented 35 communities. They had the confidence to return me virtually unchallenged over that entire time. Some communities in my state representative district I have represented for 26 years, and they have given me the honor of my lifetime. You all know how much I have loved doing this. Tonight I will hoist a Guinness to you and feel like Lou Gehrig said, I am the luckiest man on the face of the earth. God bless you all. Peace be with you.
Born in 1948, he grew up in this great state. Now he's 66 and it's time to go home. He's worked really hard, but not in his yard. Oh no, well it's Senator Brewer, he's going back home. So hoist up your glass and toast to the senator we love the most. He served us well, it's the end of a stellar career. More time with his bride, in that it takes pride. Oh yeah, He's going back to Barre, so let's wish him good cheer. He started as a local poll. He got the call. In 1989, he joined Beacon Hill. He commuted each day for not too much pay. Oh no. As soon as I'm done, we'll hear what Steve has to say. After 8 years as our rep, he decided to take the next step. The Senate became his home until today. Ways and Means he does lead, but soon he'll be free. Oh yeah. And he's hoping and Gobi will follow his lead. So tonight he gets the Golden Deeds, a book that requires no read. April and Audrey are extremely proud of their dad, and Valerie too. But she's quick to tell you he's going back to Barre, where things aren't so bad. All right, hoist up your glass. So hoist up your glass and toast to the senator we love the most. He served us well, it's the end of a stellar career. But Val will insist he hits that honey-do list. Oh yeah. Well, it's back to Barre. Let's wish him good cheer. Woo! Thank you, Steve Brewer.